Recording started.
Okay, the recording has started. So this is today's topic, how to read and annotate the passages. Then after we do, so there's going to be two main topics today. We're going to do reading and annotating passages, and then we're also going to do main idea and broad purpose questions. We're not going to be discussing every different type of these problems. For instance, we're not going to be talking about inference questions or anything like that. We're going to save those for a different presentation, so there's not a lot of confusion. But we will be talking about the two types of questions listed above. Questions about the main idea of the passage, and then questions about the broad purpose of the passage. But again, before we get started, just because we don't know who's going to be watching which study halls, we do have to do the usual announcements that we always do at the start about what types of questions are okay and what types of questions are not okay. So let's jump into that. If you've attended a lot of these study halls, you're going to know we give you this warning every single time. So just make sure that you know. The slide appears fuzzy. I've acknowledged that up here. The reason why is because I've imported it from a PDF that, for whatever reason, saved out of focus last time. So who knows what that's all about. But at least you guys can read it. If you guys can still read this, even though it's fuzzy, then give me a smiley face icon over there. If you can still read it. Okay, so it's still readable. All right, so we gotta go through the usual warnings here. As far as the question submissions goes, there's a red box around this because this is the one mistake that people make way too much. People submit things that are much, much too general for us to discuss in a 1.5-hour study hall. For instance, we got one submission this past week that said, how do I do geometry? I mean, okay, for some people geometry is a challenge area, but you can't realistically say, how do I do geometry as a single topic? Because that would be a very long presentation. Same thing like that. If you say, how do I do critical reasoning, that's just way too broad. Even saying, how do I do reading comprehension, way too broad. Your questions should be more specific than this. So for instance, how do I read and annotate a critical reasoning passage? That's about the right scope of question. But how do I do RC in general is not. Way too generic. Smiley face if you guys understand that. Okay. Not too specific. Try not to make your questions overly specific either. For instance, if you have one problem and you just want to know about the differences between two choices on one problem, that's what you should post on the forums. Like if you've got one question and you're like, I don't know why C is correct and D is wrong. That is exactly the kind of question we want to see on the forum, not here. Because remember, this is a study hall that, 100 people are going to watch. I mean, you've got usually between 20 and 40 in live attendance and then another couple hundred who watch it on a recording. So a question that specific, people are not going to really care enough about. But the forum, that's what we do over there. Finally, personal submissions. People are still occasionally doing this. Do not submit your personal data and ask for a study plan. Again, we have places on the forums for that. We have a folder called the general folder. If you post in the general folder, we will answer you usually within a couple of days. That's what these kinds of questions go in the general folder. And if you have an admissions question, like a business school admissions question, then that would go into the Ask an Admissions Counselor folder, which is also in the forum. Smiley face if these make sense. Smiley face icon over there. Okay, finally, the sources. This is the single biggest problem with people's submissions. All right, the sources. This is the biggest issue with recent submissions. People are submitting questions without a source. People are submitting problems without saying where they got the problems. I mean, you can't do that because there's a copyright issue. If you don't tell us where you got the problem from, we can't use it in the study hall because we don't know if we're stealing somebody else's problem. So if you want a full list of the problems that you're allowed to use here, you can check the lists that are posted on the forum because it's the same list. So for instance, you can use gmatprep. In fact, let me just make a list here. What sources can I use? Okay, gmatprep software. This is yes, you can use this because gmatprep software is free. You can also, but official guides, not okay. Anything published by Manhattan GMAT, yes. These are the big three. These are the questions that most people try to submit. Okay, as far as other sources go, by the way, other forums, no, because forums are not original sources of problems. So for instance, don't cite GMAT Club or Urch as a source because those guys don't write problems. The forums are just, I mean, GMAT Club and Urch are just forums where people post problems that other people wrote. So if you write me a problem and you say it's from GMAT Club, I'll have to throw it out because I'm not going to know where it's from. But when you submit specific problems, you submit one, then always indicate the source. And this includes even if the problem is one of ours. Because, I mean, we have, if you take together our strategy guides and our practice tests and our question banks and every other source of problems that's written by Manhattan GMAT, there's probably about 5,000 problems. So we clearly do not know all 5,000 of those by heart. And so if you give us one of ours, we're not going to know that unless it says so. So even if you give us a Manhattan GMAT problem, it's still on you to tell us that it's one of our problems. So smiley face, if you guys understand this, it's very important. You should always, always indicate the source of the problem. If you don't, then we will have to ignore your submission. Unfortunately, we will have to. Okay, so that's what it says down here, but people are not listening because every week we get submissions that have no source. So if you made up a problem, I don't think it's very unlikely that people, I don't think it's very likely that people will make up problems from scratch, but if you really do make up a problem from scratch, then please tell us that that's where you got the problem. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So remember, today's topic is reading comprehension, limited to the actual reading and annotating of the passages. Reading comprehension. So let's talk about it. Let's start with the structure of the longer passages, because the longer passages are much more consistently and reliably structured than the shorter passages are. So let's start by discussing the structure of the longer passages. In the OG, these are usually around 70 to 75 lines. And then on GMATprep and on the real exam, these will be longer than the window. In other words, you have to scroll. So any problem longer than the length of the window, any passage rather, longer than the length of the window, that's what we're talking about right now. So when you've got one of these longer passages, these have a pretty reliable structure. So let's talk about what that structure is. Let's say you've got the following schematic diagram. First paragraph, second paragraph. Usually there's between 3 and 5 paragraphs. On this example, I'm going to draw an example that has 3 paragraphs, and then possibly a little thing at the end, which we'll talk about in a second. So here's a longer length passage. And then as far as this last part, we're going to talk about what this is in a second. So who knows, you can type in the text box, who knows what is the first paragraph of one of these longer passages? What is it? What does it do? The first paragraph of a long passage. Okay, let's see what you guys are writing. It introduces the passage, the main idea, its background. Right, it's an intro passage, and we'll talk about the function of that. So this is an introductory passage, introductory paragraph. What are the next paragraphs called? And this mostly contains the main point. Yeah, what are the next paragraphs called? And what's in them? What are they called and what is in them? Yeah, someone's writing they develop the idea. Develop is not, I mean, it's true, but that's not really the answer that I'm looking for at the moment. I'm looking for what do they actually do or what do they have in them. And that's what you guys, yeah, body paragraphs, and they mostly contain details. They mostly contain details supporting the passage. They actually mostly don't contain arguments. That's not usually found in body paragraphs. So, but this will be body paragraph, which is mostly details. And then this is another body paragraph, which is also mostly details. So there you go. And then we'll talk about this thing here at the end in a second. But let's talk about the purpose of this before we get back to the structure of the passage. And let's ask a really important question. When you read a reading comprehension passage, why are you reading the passage? What are you looking for? Let's see what you guys come up with answers to here. Let's see what kinds of answers you guys come up with here. What are you looking for when you read the passage? Yeah, I like the answers you guys are giving. So those of you who have text boxes, which should be everybody, look in your text box and see what is written there, because I think everybody, at least in words, is expressing the right ideas here. People are expressing the right ideas. Now, what you've got to do is, in practice, you've got to actually live up to what you're saying here. Notice that nobody, and I mean nobody, is saying details in that box. The box does not say details. That's really important. we're going to have two questions, which are what are you looking for and what are you not looking for. These are both very important questions. I have no idea what that noise is. Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know what that was. So there's two issues here. The first issue is what are you looking for? The second issue is what are you not looking for? So as far as what are you looking for, you guys pretty much have it, which is the main point, you know, logic of the passage, purpose of the passage, and also tone. You don't need to explicitly say what the tone is. Like, you don't need to identify this precisely. You won't have to precisely identify this, but you should have a sense of the feeling of the passage. And by the way, most passages don't really have a feeling. Okay, this is really important to recognize. Like in GMAT reading comprehension, most passages really don't have much of a tone. It's very objective. Okay, so most passages are very objective or factual or neutral, i.e. there is not really much of an identifiable tone in most passages. Again, you will not, this is one thing that our old practice test used to do that we took out because we discovered the test never does it. And that's this. Like you will not have to identify the tone explicitly. In other words, the questions will not say what is the tone of the passage. Instead, the most you'll have to do with the tone is to try to figure out some sort of indirect, you know, like, given the way the passage is written, what do you think about this? They might ask you that. But they won't ask you what is the tone specifically. Now, what are you, so this is pretty much a good summary. Like, you guys wrote these things in the text box, they are correct. What are you not looking for? Let's get some answers to this question in the box. Yeah, content is a little bit, I mean, everything is content. So, I mean, like, and literally anything written in the passage can be called content. So, I'd be careful with that. But yes, details you do not want. Very, very important. So, you do not want to read for details. So what I like to do with my students is I like to give them two focus questions to read for when they read the passage. Because one thing you guys have probably realized is that you can't just like read something. You have to be reading for something. Otherwise, you just kind of, your eyes just kind of move over the passage. So like one basic fact about reading, which if you think about anything that you might personally read, you're going to realize this is a fact. One fact that you should know about reading. It's much easier to read for something rather than to just read a passage. You know, in other words, something, anything at all. Like if I just say read this passage and then I have some question for you afterwards, you will probably be taken by surprise by the question. You know, because you're like, I didn't know I was supposed to focus on that. And so if I just tell you to read something, you will probably not have much direction. It will be very hard to read because you'll be pulled in so many different directions at once. But then if I tell you to read for a certain fact, then you will find that fact. You will find it. So as a result, I think it's best to direct your reading with its two focus questions that I'm going to give you here in order to direct your reading, which is to give you something to read for. I'm going to give you two focus questions. The first focus question is, what's the point of the passage? And also, what's the point of each smaller unit, usually each paragraph? Always ask yourself, what is the point? Okay, now two notes about this focus question in particular. The first is, the point is never just to inform or to list facts. So if you think that, for instance, if you think the point of a passage is just to tell you a bunch of facts about something, that's wrong. That is not the point. That is never the point. You have to look past facts. I mean, there are some things you might read in the real world where the point really is just to tell you a bunch of facts. Like if I say, here's the history of Minnesota, then yeah, that's just going to be a bunch of facts. You know, these people came here in this year, and these people settled this city, and you know, fact, but not these passages. So if you think the point is just facts, you're going to have to go beyond that. So let's take that and do a little bit more detail on it on the next slide, and then we'll come back to this. All right. So when you're trying to find the point, it's never just to inform or to list facts. Okay, the point needs to go beyond the facts. So here's an example. Let's say the passage is, every Thursday night, my brother comes in from out of town and stays at my house. Okay, he sleeps over and usually eats his dinner from my kitchen. Okay, right now this is just facts. And then now let's say the next paragraph says, every Friday morning, I open my refrigerator and notice that all of the good food in the refrigerator is gone. Like all the delicious meat, all the green vegetables, everything, all gone. Okay, this is a passage. I mean, it's kind of a stupid passage, but it's still a passage. Okay, I wouldn't talk that bad about my brother, but you're kind of getting where we're going with that. And I mean, because this is a real life example, it's really, really obvious. Okay, for example, paragraph 1 is basically just facts. And so is paragraph 2. Okay, but it's just facts. Okay, like about my brother's schedule, his itinerary or whatever. And then paragraph 2 is just facts. In this case, about the inventory in my refrigerator. But the point is not just to list these facts. And I mean, this isn't really anything that I can give you a rule that you can follow. It's just something that you have to think about. You just have to say, you have to look at this and be like, why is this here? So the point is to correlate, my brother's coming and going to the absence of the good food in my fridge. And you have to just figure this out with good old common sense. I mean, you have to figure this out with common sense. I mean, there are no rules that are going to tell you this. But I'm assuming that everyone who is here can figure this out, right? I mean, this is not exactly hard. Smiley faces if you would get this, that if you look at this passage that you would be able to tell that that is the point. Okay, so good. All right, now the challenge is you've got to apply that. And notice also, okay, because this is a real life example, notice two things. The first is you don't stop at the facts. You examine why the facts are there. And just as importantly, number two, you don't memorize the details. Like for instance, most of you would probably not remember a few minutes later whether it was Wednesday or Thursday. Okay. Also, most of you wouldn't remember which specific foods were stolen. And that's the way you want to read these passages. I mean, because the thing that's funny about this is that people do not take this real-world common sense and transfer it back over into the GMAT. Like, if this were a GMAT passage, a lot of students would do the following. They would say, oh, this is facts about my brother's schedule, and this is facts about the food in my refrigerator. And then they would say, oh, the main idea is to tell facts about my brother's schedule and my refrigerator inventory. And like, no, that's not the point. But people would stop thinking. They would turn the common sense brain off. It happens all the time. Also, when you read this in real life, you don't care about the details. You don't care that it's Thursday. And you don't really care that it's like vegetables. That's not the point. The point is my brother is like taking all the good food out of my house. And you don't inordinately spend time memorizing or writing down details. But a lot of people, if this were a GMAT passage, would be like scribbling down every single specific item that was taken from the refrigerator. So, do you guys see the big difference here? I know this is a stupid passage, but give me a smiley face if you understand the focus of the passage is on these things, and not on like detail, 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 detail. Very, very super important. Okay. So, now let's go back to what we were saying about passages. So given what we've figured out about this guy, believe it or not, the focus of this stupid passage is the same as the focus of a reading comprehension passage. So what's the point of this passage? What's the point? It's never just to list facts. Even if you are just listing facts, the point is not to list facts. This is really, really important. Like some passages really do nothing but list facts. Even if they do, the point is still not to list facts. And you have to think about why the facts are there. And so that's your second focus question. The second focus question is, if the passage presents facts or details, why are they there? What is accomplished, what is justified or explained by those facts or details? In other words, you don't really care what the facts are. You just care what they do. Okay, really, really important. A lot of people actually concentrate on what the facts are and not on what the facts do. So, in other words, concentrate on what the facts do. Don't concentrate on what the facts are. A lot of people will see this and think, wow, I can't do that. I'm the type of person who thinks about facts. Well, if you say that, that's probably not really true. And as proof, I'm going to refer you back to my stupid passage about my brother. Like, absolutely nobody is going to see this passage and memorize all the facts. Like nobody. Nobody is going to do that. And notice that all of this, the point I want to make here, and I know I'm being super redundant, but it's really important. This passage literally contains nothing but facts. Nothing. There is nothing in this passage that is not a fact. And yet the point is still not the facts. The point is to correlate them. The point is to make an argument that is implicit that it's my brother's fault the food is missing. Does this make sense? Smiley face if it does. Okay, so that's how you gotta read this stuff. So note, everything here is a fact, but the point is still not just to give facts. So there's still a reason why they're there. So when we talk about the structure of a passage, now we've got to ask yourself, okay, if you pay lots of attention to the whole passage, then number one, you're going to run out of time. You're going to spend way too much time, especially if you're not a first language speaker of English. Okay, and also you're going to be overwhelmed by information. You know, smiley face if any of these things sound familiar. If any of you have felt just overwhelmed by information, or if you have taken a million years to read the passage. Okay, so that's a lot of people who are here. And again, I'm going to keep going back to the slide. If you read this passage the same way, you would kind of be overwhelmed. You would have to remember, even though it's like 2 lines, you would have to remember the timetable. You'd have to remember all the food that was gone. Even a passage this stupidly simple would be hard. It would be hard because you would feel like, oh my God, I have to remember all this food, and I have to remember what day it was, and I have to remember, oh my God, I'm going to die. If this passage is hard that way, then you can imagine that a real passage is just going to be impossible, and that's the problem with the way that a lot of people read these things. So on the other hand, the opposite is if, on the other hand, you just skim the whole thing, then you're probably just going to get nothing. Like your eyes are probably just going to go over it, and you're not going to remember anything. Especially considering that this is the verbal section. The verbal section is the last thing on the test, which means that your brain is already kind of fried when you get here. It's cooking. I mean, your brain is dead. So the chance of being able to really get much out of skimming a passage after 3.5 hours of other test taking is kind of low. So what do? Well, remember the focus questions. Okay, the focus questions were, what's the point? And if you, in the case of details, facts or details, why are they there? What do they do? What do they explain or justify? And so what you're going to do when you read a longer passage is you're going to focus in on the parts of the passage that are going to contain the information that answers these questions. So you want to focus, you want to pay very close attention to the parts that will answer these questions and skim everything else, or even skip. So let's talk about which parts are going to do that. Who knows which parts of this anatomy are going to actually answer your focus questions? Go ahead and type in the text box if you know. Like, what parts of these paragraphs are going to be most likely to contain answers to these? Okay, the whole intro. And then definitely not the whole body paragraphs. A couple of you are saying the body. In fact, I think one of you even wrote intro and body. If you write that, it's pretty much the whole thing. So it's usually just the first sentence of the body paragraph. So first sentence of the body paragraph is what's called the topic sentence. Same thing here. First sentence equals topic sentence. And then you should pay close attention to the whole intro paragraph. So you want to pay close attention to the entire intro paragraph. And then in these body paragraphs, the topic sentences are where you should put most of your attention. Now, one place where you might, and I'm going to put dotted lines around these, meaning you might and you might not. It's going to take me a really long time to draw a dotted line because I have to draw it one piece at a time. You might want to pay attention to the end if you are a fast enough reader. But don't get thrown off, because like sometimes the end of the body paragraph will help you, but usually it won't. Sometimes the last sentence of a body paragraph will also help. Usually, though, it's just more details. So you've got to be careful. If you really, really struggle with these passages, don't even pay attention to that dotted line part. Like if you really struggle with these in terms of time management or in terms of figuring out what is the main point, then just go with the solid orange lines. Intro, first topic sentence, second topic sentence. I mean, weirdly enough, you might not have to even read anything except for these. So, topic sentence, topic sentence. Any questions so far? You want to type in the text box. Doesn't look like anybody has any questions. Okay, now let's talk about this last paragraph. If you're going to ask about that last paragraph that we haven't touched yet, that's what we're going to do now. If you have any other questions, I see one or two people typing. then ask those. But if your question is what's the deal with this last paragraph, that's what we're going to do now. So, all right. And we're going to do this for a bunch of passages. So, let's see. Does the strategy change for more advanced problems? Well, right now, notice that we're not even talking about problems. Like, problems are not even on our radar yet. Like, we're just talking about reading the passage itself. There's not really such a thing as a more advanced passage. A passage is a passage is a passage. I mean, for each passage, what gets more advanced is the questions, not the passage itself. Like, if you notice the official guide, if you go through your official guide, you'll notice that there are way too many questions with each passage. Like on a long passage, you will normally only get 4 problems, but you'll notice that all the long passages in the official guide have at least 6 or 7. The reason why they do that is because some of the questions are easy and some of the questions are hard, so that's how they make it adaptive. But there's no such thing, I don't think there's a such thing as a passage itself that is inherently harder than other passages. They don't do that. So all passages are kind of the same. Okay, let's talk about this one. This bottom thing. I'm going to put that in a different color. Let's use that color. Sometimes, but not usually, there will be a change of direction, a focus shift at the end. Sometimes the passage shifts focus at the very end. Okay, if this happens, then read it, but do not include it in your answer to focus question number 1. Okay, so let me give you an example of this. Let's say that you are talking about, because remember these things are like 70 lines long. And we're talking about maybe the last 4 lines here. If you get a passage that talks about some business practice, let's say you get a passage that talks about some kind of, let me go ahead and put this on the next page. Copy, paste. Okay. A little bit more about this. I know, so those dotted lines didn't go over, but the rest of it did. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about this thing right here. Here's an example. Let's say that the passage is about some manufacturing process. Okay. And let me actually write some sentences here so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm just going to make this up more or less at random. So here's what we're going to say. Let's say your introductory paragraph starts with the following. Let's say your introductory paragraph is like, let's say you're going to write a paragraph about what's called just-in-time manufacturing. So just-in-time, JIT, manufacturing is a process that revolutionized the efficiency and robustness of the auto industry. in the 1980s. Blah, 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 x, 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 x. Okay, so, and then let's say your body paragraph started out with something like this. Let's say your first body paragraph was JIT manufacturing allowed manufacturers to allocate surplus inventory much more efficiently. And then you had details, you know, all of this stuff here, details, blah, 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 we don't care, details, 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 details. And then this won't be an example in which the last sentence helps. Now let's say that this sentence says, additionally, JIT manufacturing not only made the inventory efficient, but not only improved automakers' efficiency, but also made inventory procedures much more robust against errors. All right, let's say you see that, and then you've got, yeah, so let's get that out of here. And then the rest of it is details. So blah, 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 blah. Now let's say the passage ends with 5 or 6 lines about something like this. Let's say the end of the passage was something like,
however, despite all of JIT's advantages,
I mean, JIT is undoubtedly a beneficial or an improvement over previous inventory processes. But it does have one major drawback. It does have one occasional drawback. X, 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 blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now let's say that this, because this is how these usually are, I mean, let's say that this is, I don't know, 4 to 5 lines. And then this paragraph is like 25 lines. And then this paragraph is like 30 lines. And then this paragraph is like, I don't know, 5 lines. Wait, 5 to 6. Okay, what would you guys say? Now notice this example. I mean, I just made this up literally right now on the spot. But let's say that you had this passage. What would you guys summarize in the text box as the answer to focus question number 1? What's the point of the passage? And you can, what would you summarize as the point of this entire passage? See what you guys say here. Okay, I like the last couple of things. I want to, I don't mean to pick on any one particular individual here, but a couple of people are just saying things like new manufacturing procedure, and that's not a point. That's fact. If you just say new manufacturing procedure, you're missing the point completely. It's a lot. That's a lot like saying, for this stupid passage, that the point is just to show you when my brother comes to my house. I mean, that's not the point. You have to look past this stuff. And I mean, that's kind of the point of reading only this, and this, is you don't have as much detail. So you have JIT manufacturing is a process that revolutionized the efficiency and robustness of the auto industry in the 80s. Then the first paragraph is, it allowed manufacturers to allocate surplus inventory much more efficiently, and presumably these facts are going to be about how they did that. Like, these next 23 lines are going to be about ways that the JIT manufacturing allocates inventory. You know, it's not going to, this is just going to be details. It's not going to help you figure this out. And then this is, you know, another benefit. JITM not only improved automakers' efficiency, but also made inventory procedures much more robust against errors. And presumably this stuff is going to be a description of how they made the procedure robust against errors. Now, this is what I was saying. All right, notice the way this thing is structured. This is benefits. All right, it's a process, the point. I mean, if you go paragraph by paragraph here, what's the point of each paragraph? Intro paragraph is going to introduce a new procedure and show how it helped the auto industry. That is not just facts. Make sure you understand that. It is not just plain facts. It is, this is the point. This is doing something. We're actually showing you why or how it helped the auto industry. Very significant. All right, smiley faces if this makes sense. So, and I mean, again, that's just the first paragraph, but the intro paragraph should already give you a pretty good idea. Now, this paragraph is, you just basically summarize this in your own words. So, one major benefit, you know, describes one major benefit of the process. This describes another major benefit of JITM. Notice this is all you have to say. This is all you have to say. You do not have to talk about surplus inventory. You do not have to talk about efficiency, because that's not the focus question. The focus question is, why is this here? It's here. Efficiency is not the reason why this is here. The reason why this is here is this is one major benefit of this process to the auto industry. The reason why this is here is that, again, it's another major benefit of this process to the auto industry. Okay, do not copy details into your, do not let details creep into your focus questions. Very important. It's easy to do that. Okay, now what's going on in this last part is giving one possible objection to the process. Now remember what we said, okay? We've got 59 to 60 lines of benefit, 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 and more benefit. And we've got 5 to 6 lines of objection. Okay, this is what we're talking about with an abrupt shift of focus at the very end of the passage. Like, what's going on here? We just totally shifted gears. Okay, if this happens, this is not part of the main idea. Okay, this is really, really important to realize this. Okay, this is an abrupt shift in the last few lines. Therefore, this is not, repeat, not part of the main idea. It's just not. So a couple people wrote something like pros and cons of JIT manufacturing. If you wrote that, let me tell you why you wrote that. If you wrote that, it's because this came at the end and you were unduly influenced by it. Because there is this thing called the grocery list effect. What the grocery list effect is, imagine a really long grocery list. If somebody read it to you, or if you just had to read it one time, you would remember the things at the end of the list, and you would remember them much better than everything else. So the end of the passage is going to try to exert a pull on you. It's going to try to convince you that it's more important. Not let that happen. If the focus shifts in the last few lines to something that was never discussed up here, that's not part of the main idea. It just isn't. Okay, smiley face if this makes sense. Smiley face. Okay, that's really, really super important because a lot of passages do this. Okay, so for an OG passage that does this, I'm not allowed to reproduce those, but for an official passage that does this, abrupt shift ending, see OG 12, passage on page 386. It should be a passage about ice ages. In that passage, the last paragraph is not part of the main idea. Okay, so again, I'm not allowed to reproduce that passage here because it would be a copyright violation, but I'm assuming you all have the official guide. One person put, are we focusing on the structure of the passage? Well, yeah, maybe, but the problem is when you say focus on the structure of the passage, nobody knows what I mean when I say that. I mean, that's a very vague, happy, hand-waving, smiley thing to say, but nobody knows what that really means. You know, like what if I ask 30 people what the structure of the passage is, I'm going to get 31 different answers to that. You know, no one knows what that means. So I'm trying to be very specific with these focus questions. So this. Okay, so the main idea of this, the best summary of the main idea then would be to take these three and kind of try to collapse them into one giant main idea. So if you do that, then you get a main idea. The overall main idea of this thing is to present a new manufacturing process and show how it benefits a certain industry. You know, any questions? If you wrote as your main idea that JITM has both pros and cons, there's a really big lesson for you to learn here, which is that if there's a big shift in the last paragraph, you do not care as far as the main idea. Just ignore it. I mean, you might have to answer detailed questions about it, but main idea, not even part of it. Okay, so yeah, the question is no. The last question, let me answer Gaurav's question first. Can the main idea of the passage and the point of the paragraph be the same? If it's this paragraph, almost always. I mean, the first paragraph will usually, even by itself, give you a pretty good idea. Like if you notice, this here is almost the same as this. So if you're really, really, really pressed for time and you have a main idea question, you might even just try to read this, although there are some dangers involved in it. the poster who wrote, will the last paragraph never contribute? No, if you read what I wrote here, sometimes the passage shifts focus at the end. This does not happen all the time. In fact, I think most of the time it doesn't. Like, this doesn't always happen, or even usually. Sometimes the passage just cuts off with the body paragraph. So it's up to you to figure out whether this happens or not. I mean, you'll know. Like, if this passage, like this passage over here might just do that. If that happens, then that means there's no shift of focus at the end, and so everything is part of the point. There's no hard rules for this. You are not going to be able to memorize things that will tell you whether this happens or not. You can't. You have to think. It's just like the example with my brother and the food. As simple as that is, you cannot memorize anything that will tell you that. You have to think. You cannot avoid the thinking aspect. So if the shift occurs, like if you are like, whoa, buddy, we weren't talking about that, then that's this. If it just continues what's already up here, then it's probably just another body paragraph. No, the one thing that you generally never see in these passages is a concluding paragraph. It's very important. Like, also important to know, you don't usually ever see traditional concluding paragraphs. Don't normally see traditional concluding paragraphs, i.e. paragraphs that summarize at the end. It'll either be one of two things. Like normally it will either be one, another body, just another body paragraph, or two, an abrupt shift of focus. Yeah, the one thing these passages really aren't going to do is conclude with a traditional conclusion. It just doesn't happen. The reason why it doesn't happen for the most part is because there's no room to do that. Like because a traditional conclusion is totally redundant. You know, if you think about it, a traditional conclusion doesn't do anything that the intro doesn't already do. So they don't want to waste your time, which is basically the reason that they don't do that. But you got to decide whether they suddenly started totally talking about something else, and if they did, then this is what's going on. If not, then no. Any questions? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start looking. No, if you don't have questions, you can just not say anything. Yeah, you don't have to type no. That's funny. If 31 people type no, that would be an issue. If you do have questions, you type the question in the text box. If not, then yeah, you can just chill. All right. Let's actually try to do this for a passage. Okay, this one is unusual in that the intro paragraph is really long. But let's read this, and I gotta do it this way. Notice you don't have to read as much of it as you thought you did. That and that. Okay. Take about a minute or two to check these out, and then we will. I'm going to make it a little smaller. Okay. Check that out real quick. Give you another 30 seconds or so to examine this. Okay, does anybody need more time at least to analyze this thing? If you need more time, go ahead and give me the smiley guy. If you don't, let's start talking about it. Okay, let's try this. In the text box, I don't want to ask you quite yet what the, because for the intro paragraph's kind of long here, and we do want you to pay attention to all of it. What do you guys think that this tells you? And I don't mean literally, so do not give me a literal interpretation of that. Like don't say something like, well, this view was the preferred view for most of the 20th century, because that's what it already says. Why do you think that is there? Yeah, it means that exactly. If they say that, you know that there is going to be some like challenge to that view. And again, if you don't realize that, just think common sense-wise about what it would mean if somebody did this out in the real world. If somebody said, for most of my life, I thought that X, you know what that means. You know they are going to start talking about some other thing that they thought after that. You just know that. So if that is not obvious to you, then try to imagine somebody telling you this and see if that helps. So this helps you. This means that you can anticipate a challenge to this view, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't have written this. Okay. Also, notice the other transition word. There's a however here. So, yeah. Okay. People used to think this. All right, I'm going to highlight facts in this color really quickly. These are facts. What is the point? Like, focus question number 2. These are facts. You do not want to copy these down. These facts are here to do what? Go ahead and try that in the text box. What are those facts? Why is that there? Why are you telling me this? Yeah. These are, I don't like words like support because that doesn't really mean anything. I mean, everything is support for something. So you gotta give me an answer that would mean something in the real world. Like if you just said that's support to somebody who was talking to you, they would be like, dude, what? So yeah, you have to be right. This is actions based on the old view, right? I mean, these are actions based on the old view. Okay. Now, what's the point of, this is not just random facts. All right, this is the old idea. The old view is in that color. What is this? Smiley, go ahead and type in the text box, what is that? It's you guys are close. It's not the new view. It's because that's not a view. I mean, this is still a fact, but this is what made people rethink the old view. So they're suggesting, notice they're not actually saying it. This is really important. It's like if I say my brother has been here and the food is gone. I'm not actually telling you my brother stole the food, but obviously that's the point. So here they are not actually telling you that the new view is that small firms are important, but they are obviously suggesting that. Okay, so this green text doesn't say, but clearly suggests the new view, which is that small firms might be important after all. Smiley face if that makes sense. I mean, that's not written there, but you are definitely supposed to figure that out. Okay. And then this is, the difference between suggesting and saying is that you don't say it when you suggest it. You imply. So, you know, if I tell someone, you know, I don't know, let me give you an example. Like if I tell you I can't make it to the party tonight, then I am telling you that I cannot make it to the party tonight. If you talk about the party and I'm like, I have lots of things to do tonight and I have to take care of my wife who's sick and my kid who's also sick. I'm not saying I can't come to the party, but I'm clearly implying that. It's a suggestion. So, I mean, a lot of people don't even differentiate between the two. But, I mean, the point of both is the same. Like, one is a little bit more, like, socially acceptable, but it's the same. So, this stuff right here, who knows what this is doing? Text box, what is that doing? Yeah, this is the evidence, right? So, like that's this. Let me say evidence. This is the evidence. So we don't need to write anything else down here, really. This is just, oh, by the way, that's the evidence. Although no systematic evidence exists to determine unequivocally whether blah, 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 blah. So they're just saying they don't know this for sure. So we don't know either way. And then this again, this is now they're explicitly saying this is the new view. or at least, it's more, new view more explicitly. Okay, that's a long intro paragraph. But how would you, now let's try to collapse this. This is what we have to do to get a main idea out of this stuff. We have to collapse this into like one kind of sentence. So see if you can do that in the text box. How would you, in one sentence or one line, summarize all of this? See if a few of you right. Okay, you were getting closer. The second one of those is better than the first one. You guys are still stating way too many facts, though. Like the purpose. Here, tell you what. Let me help you guys out. The purpose of paragraph 1 is to, let's fill in these actual blanks. All right, try that again. And you have to kind of get all of this in there. So if you say to describe the role of small firms, that's not really true, because that's not what it does. Like, we're not talking about factually what small firms do. And if you just say introduce a new view, that's kind of sort of getting better, but it's still only half of it. That, yeah, okay, I like what 70 plus is doing. And he's saying show a shift in viewpoints. I'm hoping that you meant that to be 700 plus. So it says 70 plus. Okay, yeah, to show the importance of small firms, no, it's not to show the importance of small firms. Like, I mean, again, first of all, if you do that, you're completely ignoring the first half of it, totally ignoring. And secondly, no, it's not, because look at the yellow part. We don't really know if they're important or not. Like nobody knows. That's what the yellow part is trying to tell you. We actually have no clue whether small firms are important or not. So you got to really, really summarize all of this. And the best way to summarize this is to like talk about, a new viewpoint coming out to counter an old one. So describe the origin of and development of 70 more points. Okay, so that'd be more like plus 70, not 70 plus. All right, to describe the origin and development of a new view on a particular economic topic. You don't even need to say what the topic is, And I mean, if you guys are really too focused on details, then one thing you can do, and you're really not going to like it, but one thing you should try to do this without naming any specific facts. Like I said, you're not going to like it. So, but notice that's what I just did. I didn't say small firm role. I said a particular economic topic. I didn't say what the views were. I just said there was a new view, and then we should probably add versus the old view. All right, you should try to do this. If you do this with no naming of facts, you will be forced to figure out what the point is, because you can't just fall back on saying stuff like small firms, because that's not a point. I mean, that isn't a point. The point is this. Smiley face if this makes sense. Notice that this is a capsule summary of everything that we wrote up here. Okay, now notice what paragraph 2 does. All you really have to read is this. Okay, so in the text box, what is the point of paragraph 2? Exactly. It just presents the new view. But that's all it does. So this is the new view. And notice that these are details that you don't really have to read, because you don't really so much care. If you need to know these, you'll come back and get them later. You know, just get these details later if you need them. But the point is, presents the new view explicitly. Notice it doesn't happen explicitly until this point, but now it happens explicitly. What is the third paragraph? What's the main point? Remember, this is all you need. What is the point here? Empirical knowledge about the relative roles is based upon anecdotal evidence and case studies. Such evidence is proved inadequate to answer major questions. Let me ask you guys a question. Okay, the point here is, that, you know, we're not really sure. The evidence doesn't prove either viewpoint. The data are insufficient. That's a good way to say it, yeah. Excellent. Notice, I like the way Kaushik wrote it, because he wrote the data are insufficient. I like that because you rephrased it. Do not copy the words. So if you wrote evidence was inadequate, I would want to yell at you. But if you wrote data insufficient, that's good, because that shows that you understand what they're talking about. If you copy the words, that generally means you do not have a clue what they're talking about. But so the evidence doesn't settle the issue. We don't know. Now here's a stupid question. Is this an M cube? Yeah, but that's too many facts. I mean, you're still listing facts, lots of details. There's too many details there for that to be a really main point. I mean, the main point of this is just to say we don't know whether the new view is right or wrong. So maybe that's an easier way to put that. We don't know which view is right and which one is wrong. That's the real point of that. Stupid question. Is this an abrupt shift? Yes or no? Like, is this kind of like that? Yes or no? So yeah, no, it's not. We've got about 12 no votes. Who can explain why not? Okay, qualifies the previous point. That's true, although so does this. So you got to be careful with that. Like this also qualifies all of this stuff, but this is an abrupt shift. So just because you're qualifying does not mean that it's okay. Yeah, Deborah's got it. It's because it's the yellow stuff again, right? This stuff we saw before. Somebody already said that. Like this is, Deborah's got it nailed. It is exactly what is already up there, just with more detail. So I don't know what happened there. Can you guys see an arrow on there? There's supposed to be an arrow on there. Okay, this is already there. So we don't know who's right. So it describes the origin of a new view. It presents the new view. We don't know what we don't know. So the overall point, how would you summarize in one sentence the overall point of this whole thing? Try to do it in one line. Yeah, that's pretty good. An author presents a new view, but it's inconclusive. So to present, but then qualify a new view on something. That's good enough. That's the main point of the entire thing. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Note all by yourself. Who can answer 70 plus? And if whoever's got the answer to that in the text box, just answer him. I'm sure some of you guys can answer that question. The question that he wrote there, does the old view prevail? Whoever's got the answer to that, answer him, please. Okay, yeah, no, it doesn't. And how do we know that in the text box? It's because it's inconclusive. I mean, again, look at paragraph 3. The whole point of paragraph 3 is we have no idea who is right. That's what all of this says and all of the other stuff. So, yeah, we don't know. All right. So here's a main idea question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you A through E buttons. All right, you should have just seen some A through E buttons appear. Does everybody see the A through E over here? They should be next to the door. Does everybody see that? Smiley face if you do. Okay, those are what you're going to use to answer the question that shows up on this page. Main idea question. So just answer it with these buttons. Do not answer it in the text box. Okay, try to, if you have not yet answered this, try to answer it in the next 10 or 15 seconds. A couple of you are, I mean, if your answer's up there, I can see it. The only people who don't have answers up there are Shanti SSV at Yahoo, Thacker A, Marco, and Gaurav, and Dinesh, and Vishal, and Ali. So you guys should answer the question. Okay, we're still waiting on Marco and Thacker A. So if you're here, give me an answer, please. If you have to guess, guess. Remember on this test, you do have to guess things. So, okay. Here's the results. Everybody answered except Thacker A. So Thacker A, if you're here, on the test you can't do that. You can't take a million years to guess something. Here's the statistics. So notice you guys just destroyed this question. You guys just nailed it. And D is definitely the correct answer. Who knows? Okay, because a lot of people have trouble with these questions, right? Like when I look at boards like the forums, most people's forum questions about reading comp are main idea questions. That's what most people have trouble with. And you guys 25 out of 20, actually 25 out of 27, because the one of the inconclusive people is me. So basically everybody got this right. So who knows why this was so easy here? Because this is really important, because it's going to tell us how we should do these problems. We discussed it, but that's not really the point, because that's stuff that, yeah, we'll get to those other ones in a second. This is the point. The point is you figured it out ahead of time. So here's the deal. When you get a main idea question, you know, you should be able to figure these things out before you look at the choices. So here's the procedure for main idea questions. The reason why this was so easy for you guys is because you figured out the answer ahead of time. That's why. So that what you want to do with these is, if you see a main idea question, and I'm not kidding about this, you should physically cover up the choices. Like literally cover them up. So be like, wham, I'm going to take my yellow plastic pad and physically cover them. Not a joke. Then, once you've done that, predict your answer based on your notes and focus questions. And then check your answer. I mean, this is really super important. You've got to do this before you look at anything. Before you look at the choices, you need to predict. Here's why. Okay, if you don't have an idea in your head ahead of time, the answer choices are very good salespeople. If you don't, I think that might be an hour chime or something. If you don't predict your answer ahead of time, then the wrong answers will sell you the wrong idea. You'll start looking for the things in the wrong answers, and then you'll think that you see them, even if they are totally not there. I mean, because this is what happens, okay? Like, I mean, I'm sure you've all had these experiences socially where, you know, your friend is describing somebody that you're going to meet. No, this is just main idea questions. This is only main idea questions. This is absolutely not other questions. This is not even other verbal questions. This is not even other RC questions. This is main idea questions only. That's it. I mean, the inferences and stuff, yeah, you have to look at the choice. But what'll happen here is, okay, it's kind of like when you describe, if someone like let's say you watch someone just go about their daily life, you know, nothing special, you just kind of see someone, you know, talking to people and interacting with their kids and stuff like that. And then someone is like, oh, that person is sketchy, or that person is kind of, you know, can't be trusted, or is very creepy or something like that. What'll happen is, as soon as that person tells you this person is creepy, you will start thinking that you see creepiness in everything that person does. You know, so if that person is just playing with their kid, before it looked normal. You know, before it was just like, oh, hey, they're playing with their kid. But then as soon as you hear someone say, oh, that guy's creepy, you know this happens. All of a sudden you're like, ooh, I don't like the way he's playing with his kid. It happens. Even if it's not in there at all, even if the interaction is totally innocent, as soon as someone tells you a wrong idea, you will start thinking it. That's kind of how the brain works. And so the problem with these wrong answers, here's the wrong answers. is that if you do not have this idea in your head already, these are totally wrong answers, but they will sell you on the wrong answer. So like, for instance, what you need to do is you need to see this question, and then what you do is you're like, okay, oh, hey, it's a main idea question. Quick, let me cover everything up. It's really important. You need to physically cover it up. That means you have to put something in front of the screen so that you cannot see the choices. That's what that means. You should actually not be able to see them. Because remember, they're going to be on a computer screen. You can't put a paper over another paper. You have to hold something up in front of the screen. If you have too much trouble with the text, like if you don't understand points like these, then don't even bother. Just guess the main idea, because you're not going to get it. So like, if you can't come up with these kinds of summaries, then you might as well you can try process of elimination, but for the most part, you're just going to have to guess. So, but look at the success rate that we had by doing that. The reasons why these other choices are wrong is A is wrong because nothing is dismissed. I mean, at the end of the passage, we don't know who's right and who's wrong. It doesn't suggest, there's no long-standing problem here. It's just, and there's no solution. It's just people don't understand how important small firms are, or if they're not. But there's no problem to be solved. It's just, something people are trying to figure out. C is not true because nothing is resolved. I mean, it describes two competing viewpoints, but nothing is resolved at the end at all. It just says, here's the old view, here's the new view. We have no idea who's right. And then for the same reason, there's no defending. And in fact, possible counter evidence is not given. The only evidence given, I mean, this is wrong because the only evidence given for anything in this passage is actually given for the alternative viewpoint, not against. So, like, here's evidence for the viewpoint, the mini-mills example. There's no evidence against it at all. I mean, there's uncertainties, but that's not counter evidence. But if you can do this, if you can predict the overall point, you should be able to just pick out the answer that is correct. And so this is the way you want to do it. You want to physically cover it up, because then you don't have to deal with the answer choices selling you stuff. I mean, because believe me, the answer choices are very good salespeople. They are very good. They will get you thinking things that are totally not true at all. But it's easy to do that. Okay, so what we've learned, we're actually out of time. In fact, we're about 10 minutes past time, which is, I had a couple more passages on the slides, but we're already over by about, 10 minutes already. So depending on what happens next time. Okay, I mean, I had a few more passages, so, but we're already 10 minutes over. So, if there are not very many student question submissions, we may just continue this workshop next time. If not, then we'll do it at a later date. By the way, the next workshop is in 3 weeks, not 2. The next workshop will be 3 weeks from today, not 2 weeks. September 9th. We don't know the exact time just yet, but it'll be somewhere around, it's going to be the later time slot. It's going to be somewhere around 7 or 7:30 Pacific, which is 10 or 10:30 Eastern. So in the later time slot. It alternates. This is the early time slot, so the next one will be in the later time slot. That's how we do it. I mean, every time it just switches. So, okay, somebody wrote wow, and I'm not sure why. So, but it's 3 weeks until our next session. Okay, so if there are any, I mean, we can't make everybody happy. Like, we have students most of our students are in America, and then we have people in India, and we have people in Europe, and we have some people in places like South America, but those people are on the same timeline we are. There's the recordings, though. Every session that happens is recorded, and you can watch it. So if you don't want to watch it at 3 in the morning, then you can just wait for the recording to be posted. It did take a while this last time to post the recording. Even though I'm not the one who does that, I'll apologize for the people who do, because that was kind of a long delay. So usually we'll try to have these posted in a couple days. If you have technical problems, Sudanshu, I do not know anything about technical issues. I'm completely tech illiterate. So if you have tech issues with the recordings, then the link is up. The link is online. So it's the June 24th session. But if you have tech issues, then there's your email address. But it's not listed as Tommy, but it's up there. It's the recording for June 24th. So yeah, the very, very first one we didn't bother to record, so it's been lost forever. Cry tears. I might do some of those topics. Yeah. Okay. So here's the deal. We are now done. If you have questions that are like not questions about specific material, this is not the time and the place for that. But if you have general